All right, let's get straight into it. I feel like this might be an area that can be kind of overlooked, but podcast is actually where I get the bulk of my code motivation, if you can call it that. And also I listen to very few purely dedicated programming podcasts. So most of the episodes on this list will be from more famous podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience and the Tim Ferris Show. So what I get from these podcast episodes is mainly inspiration for what can be achieved through code, and also just a general excitement about programming. I think it's incredibly interesting just to hear how many different companies have been started by essentially programmers, and it just motivates me to kind of hear what's possible. And also, before I start, I just want to mention that I've left timestamps to all the different episodes that I'll mention and the names of those episodes in the description of this video. So in case you want to skip ahead to those ones, then feel free to do so. Okay, so here goes. Episode number 1 on my list is episode 125 of the Tim Ferris Show. And the guest in this episode is Sivers, who I'd actually never heard of before listening to this episode. But he apparently founded a company called CD Baby, which was for selling CDs online, basically. And what he did really isn't why I love this episode. The reason that I love this episode so much is that he seems to have such a great idea on just lifestyle design in general. So basically setting your life up in such a way that you have maximal amount of time to spend on the things that you love. And he also has some really interesting stories to go along with this. And overall, it's just a really interesting episode. So I figured that I'll choose a short excerpt that I particularly like from each podcast episode that I'll mention on this list. And then I'll play it for you so that you can kind of get an idea of what the episode is like. So here goes. Here's an excerpt from this episode.
You have to do the hell yeah or no approach, or people ask you to go to events, or God, even people asking to do a phone call or anything. I think, am I really excited about that? And, almost every time the answer is no. So I say no to almost everything. And then, occasionally something will come up. Even a little surprise will be dropped in my lap, like this thing that happened just 2 months ago called the Now project, which we don't even really need to talk about. The details don't matter so much, but it was just something that popped up that seemed really interesting and people really wanted. And luckily, because I say no to almost everything, I had the time in my life to make it flourish. So for the last 6 weeks, all I did full time, 12 hours a day, was suddenly work on this brand new thing that showed up because I could, So that's to me the lovely result of taking the hell yeah or no approach to life.
Okay, so I've probably listened to this episode 20 times at least, so I can highly recommend it. Alright, so episode number 2, just a quick heads up. A lot of the episodes on my list are from the Tim Ferris Show. He's just interviewed a lot of really good ones. So this episode is also from the Tim Ferris Show, and that is episode 353, where he interviews Patrick Collison, who is the CEO of Stripe. And Stripe is basically a online payment company. In this episode, Patrick talks a little bit about the importance of focusing on making a really great product over other things like maybe marketing. So if you create a really great product, then it will spread organically. So here's a little excerpt from this.
Whereas if you have to compete on the merits of the product and just kind of rely on people kind of being honest about how well it works or doesn't, that kind of forces you to just build a kind of product development organization that can compete. And so it might be harder to kind of get that initial traction. But if you can get there, you actually really have kind of an upper hand relative to kind of more traditionally incentivized companies, because they've probably gotten a bit lazy and a bit ossified and just a bit less competitive on this axis. And once you can make the battle about the quality of your product and the quality of your product development, you can't just kind of click your fingers and be like, okay, now we're going to start creating good products. It's such a deep cultural and organizational thing that it's very difficult for competitors or potential competitors to shift there. Whereas if you just have a better marketing campaign, that's super easy to copy. Anyone else can, buy a competing billboard or pay more for the Google ads or whatever. And so, again, we didn't kind of realize all this in advance, but I think that ended up really helping us.
And the last thing I wanted to say, just to underscore something you mentioned, which is really important, is if your customer acquisition is predicated on paid acquisition,
yes,
that makes you just a sitting duck for incumbents
Exactly.
who have larger budgets.
Yes.
And they can just decide to bleed chips for a period of time until you run out of chips.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really, really important. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Okay, so most of the episodes on this list I've probably listened to 10 plus times. And the reason is that when I go to the gym, I like to just listen to a podcast episode when I do cardio. And since I'm such like a routine-based person, I tend to just listen to the same ones over and over. Anyway, I really recommend this one. Episode number 3, this one is from a podcast called the Artificial Intelligence Podcast that's hosted by Lex Friedman. And Lex Friedman is a research scientist at MIT who works on human-centered AI. And I'm literally just reading this off of his Wikipedia page right now. And he has a really awesome podcast with a lot of super interesting guests, and some of which are in this list in this video. And this particular one is called Guido van Rossum Python. And he interviews the creator of Python, which is just really interesting. So here's an excerpt.
Everything you see, all the piece of information, you look around this room, I'm wearing a black shirt, I have a certain height, I'm a human, all these, there's probably tens of thousands of facts you pick up moment by moment about this scene. You take them for granted and you aggregate them together to understand the scene. You don't think all of that could be encoded to where at the end of the day you can just put it all on the table and calculate? Oh,
I don't know what that means. I mean, yes, in the sense that there is no actual magic there, but there are enough layers of abstraction from the facts as they enter my eyes and my ears to the understanding of the scene that I don't think that AI has really covered enough of that distance. It's like if you take a human body and you realize it's built out of atoms, well, that is a uselessly reductionist view, right?
So definitely check this one out. Super interesting. Let's move on. Number 4. This is episode 36 of the Tim Ferris Show, and in this episode he interviews Alexis Ohanian, who is one of the co-founders of Reddit. And again, just hearing this gets me excited to code. He interviews Alexis Ohanian and they talk about how Reddit came to be, and it's just a super interesting episode. Roll the excerpt.
Do you have any particular morning or evening ritual or just patterns in, say, how you spend the first hour of your day or 2 hours of your day? What is that? And it could be a weekly thing. It could be that you spend Mondays doing A and Wednesdays doing B, anything like that. But I find that people usually have certain patterns and rituals. I have a sort of a way that I go about, say, doing meditation and then having tea and then whatever. But what does the first, say, hour or two of your day tend to look like?
Dude, real quick, what do you think? I downloaded Headspace because I don't know if you could tell me this is correlation or causation, but after I got back from Burning Man, I had it planted in my head that I should really try meditation, which is not something I do at all and have never done, but I'm intrigued by. So I want to talk about that. But my morning ritual is waking up, feeding my cat, and making coffee.
When do you wake up?
If I'm not forcing myself to exercise, it is whenever I wake up, which is amazing. I usually stay up probably later than I should, but I wake up whenever I kind of wake up.
And that tends to be before noon?
Yeah. 10, like around 10.
Okay.
10, 11. Yeah, depending on the night.
So go listen to that one. Now, number 5. This is episode 1169 of the Joe Rogan Experience, where he interviews Elon Musk. And I feel like this list would not have been complete without at least one Elon Musk interview, even though I wish someone would just take a deep dive into just his routines and habits and time management. I'd love to see like a documentary about 1 week in his life, and I'd want to see all the boring stuff, like him sitting at a computer working, everything. I want to see exactly what he does, kind of how he does his time management, basically. And Joe Rogan kind of touches on this at the start of the episode, but he pretty quickly moves on, and I just wish he would have gone deeper into this. But maybe that was good that he didn't go deeper into this, because maybe no one else would have wanted to hear about that. Anyway, here's the excerpt.
how do you have the time? How do you have the time to do that, though? I mean, I understand that it's not a big deal in terms of all the other things that you do, but how do you have time to do anything? I don't understand your time management skills.
I mean, I didn't spend much time on this flamethrower. I mean, to be totally frank, it's actually just a roofing torch with an air rifle cover. It's not a real flamethrower.
But you do so many different things. Forget about the flamethrower. Like, how do you do all that other shit? Like, how does one decide to fix LA traffic by drilling holes in the ground? And who do you even approach with that? Like, when you have this idea, who do you talk to about that?
I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be successful or sort of, I mean, it's just like asserting that it's going to be successful. But so far, I've lived in LA for 16 years, and the traffic has always been terrible. And so I don't see any other ideas for improving the traffic. So in desperation, we're going to dig a tunnel, and maybe that tunnel will be successful, and maybe it won't.
So if you haven't already, then definitely go check that out. Now, episode number 6, this one is an interview with Gebbia, who is one of the co-founders of Airbnb. And this again is on the Tim Ferris show, episode number 301. In this one, there aren't many references to programming per se, because Gebbia is not a programmer, he's a graphic designer, I believe. However, he's a great storyteller, and he tells tons of different stories about things that he's done throughout his life that are super interesting and that still for some reason inspire me to code. He also talks about some companies that he started, and I feel like anytime someone talks about a company they've started, it just inspires me to get better at programming and start coding straight away. And it's also really exciting to think that a lot of startups and companies need some form of programming in order to actually work. So anyway, here's an excerpt from this episode.
So I have to pick one of his chairs and make it 8 times. He made this beautiful bench out of just 4 pieces of wood. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, these benches are really big. That's a lot of wood. I can't afford this. I'm just a freshman in college. And so I'm out.
So you had to cover all your material cost.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, no. That's an important detail, right?
I had a study job at the time. I was trying to fund this however I could. And so I'm in the quad one day outside the freshman dorms, and I make an observation. Everyone's standing around smoking here in the quad, and there's actually nowhere to sit. I've got this bench design that I'm going to make. What if I approach the school, get them to pay for the wood, I'll make the benches for my project, then they can have them afterwards to put in the quad for people to sit on. So I go to the head of Residence Life, I pitch him the idea, he loves it. They fund a few $1,000s worth of this inch-thick plywood, and in doing so, I get access to the school's wood shops and the school's craftsmen who work on campus. And so now I've got their help to help fabricate these benches.
Amazing.
And they paid for all the wood, which I definitely could never have afforded. And so by the end of the semester, I've amassed 16 full-size functional chairs. And Gareth had no clue.
So go listen to that one. Now, episode number 7, Jeff Atwood and Stack Overflow and Coding Horror. This one is from the Artificial Intelligence podcast, and I only recently discovered this podcast, and so I only recently listened to this episode. But I mean, listening to one of the creators of Stack Overflow, if that doesn't get you excited, then I don't know what will. But I mean, I guess if that doesn't get you excited, then you probably haven't gotten this far. Anyway, roll the excerpt.
You've created the code keyboard. I've programmed most of my adult life on a Kinesis keyboard. I have one upstairs now. Can you describe what a mechanical keyboard is, and why is it something that makes you happy?
Well, this is another fetish item, really. It's not required. You can do programming on any kind of keyboard, right? Even an on-screen keyboard. Oh God, that's terrifying, right? But you could.
Touch. You could.
I mean, if you look back to the early days of computing, there were chiclet keyboards, which are, those are awful, right? But
what's a chiclet keyboard?
Oh God. Okay. Well, it's just thin rubber membranes.
Oh, the rubber ones. Oh no.
Super bad, right?
Yeah.
So it's a fetish item. All that really says is, look, I care really about keyboards because the keyboard is the primary method of communication with the computer, right? So it's just like having a nice mic for this podcast. Mm-hmm. You want a nice keyboard, right? Because it has very tactile feel. I can tell exactly when I press the key. Mm-hmm. I get that little click. So, and it feels good. And it's also kind of a fetish item. It's like, wow, I care enough about programming that I care about the tool, the primary tool that I use to communicate with the computer, make sure it's as good as it feels good to use for me. Mm-hmm. And I can be very productive with it. So
To be honest, it's a little bit of a fetish item, but a good one. It indicates that you're serious. It indicates you're interested. It indicates that you care about the fundamentals, because you know what makes you a good programmer? Being able to type really fast, right? Like this is true, right? So a core skill is just being able to type fast enough to get your ideas out of your head into the code base. So just practicing your typing can make you a better programmer.
I love that part, and I completely agree. I feel like if you are a programmer, then your keyboard should be like an extension of yourself. So I think it's worth putting a lot of time and effort into picking the right one. Okay, so that is 7 episodes, and I feel like this video is getting kind of long, so I thought I'd end it here. Feel free to leave a comment if there are any episodes that you feel like I missed that you really love, because like I said, I love to listen to this stuff, so any tips are very much welcomed. And I also have several more episodes that I really like. So if you want me to make a second video, then let me know by liking this one. I mean, if you feel like it, you don't have to, of course, but I guess you knew that. Anyway, that's it for this one. I hope I'll see you in the next one.